Good evening, and it's great to have you with us here on this Wednesday night. And we begin tonight with the coronavirus outbreak here in the U.S. and around the world. Tonight, the World Health Organization now declaring it a global pandemic, citing the alarming levels of spread, but also the alarming levels of inaction, in their words. President Trump is set to address the nation tonight from the Oval Office. The death toll rising here in the U.S. to at least 36, 3 deaths just today. More than 1,100 cases now reported in 41 states. Tonight, 3 more states added just today, 18 states declaring states of emergency. And Dr. Anthony Fauci from the National Institutes of Health warning Congress today that the coronavirus is 10 times more lethal than the seasonal flu, and that the outbreak is, quote, going to get worse, and that we are vulnerable to shortages, he says, respiratory protection for our health care workers among his concerns. And tonight, the National Guard now moving in that first containment zone outside New York City, cleaning crews moving in with them. In Boston tonight, the number of cases tied to that one conference now growing, at least 77 cases now testing positive. And news coming in tonight, among the major events canceled or changed, now the NCAA tournament will be played without fans this year. Again, the president set to address the nation tonight. The White House sending out a memo late today. The president acknowledging, among other things, the need to address the anticipated shortage of respirators in this fight. ABC's Whit Johnson leading us off again tonight.
Tonight, for the first time in more than a decade, the World Health Organization is declaring a global pandemic.
Pandemic is not a word to use lightly or carelessly.
With thousands killed in more than 100 countries on 6 continents, the novel coronavirus now meeting that grim definition. Sustained worldwide spread of a new disease, person to person, impacting large numbers of people.
We're deeply concerned both by the alarming levels of spread and severity and by the alarming levels of inaction.
On Capitol Hill today, the nation's leading infectious disease expert issuing this dire warning.
It is 10 times more lethal than the seasonal flu. I think that's something that people can get their arms around and understand.
Dr. Anthony Fauci telling lawmakers that the virus will continue to spread, but how bad it gets will depend on how governments respond.
We will see more cases and things will get worse than they are right now. Bottom line, it's going to get worse.
It got worse fast for Clay Bentley, a retired officer from Rome, Georgia, who was sent home from an urgent care after a flu test came back negative.
Over the next 4 days, I got really bad.
He called the hospital and finally got tested for the virus, positive for COVID-19. He's now worried about his family getting it.
I just assumed I had the flu. No energy. Hard time breathing. Achy all over. Cold chills. Fevers. I have had the flu before, but I ain't never felt this bad.
Infections in Massachusetts more than doubling, with at least 70 of the cases connected to a Biogen employee conference held in Boston last month. Across the country, drastic measures. In New York, where the number of cases now tops 200, the National Guard preparing for deployment in that so-called containment zone. A 1-mile radius in New Rochelle, north of Manhattan. That cluster, home to the state's biggest outbreak, linked back to that New Rochelle attorney, still in critical condition. Today, community groups prepping food for families, especially those with kids stuck at home.
We're definitely hearing from some families that it is a hardship. We're providing some meals today.
Nationwide, the virus has prompted more than 1,500 schools to close, impacting more than 1 million students. In the Seattle area, where the most Americans have died from the virus, officials shutting down schools for 53,000 students and banning all events with 250 or more people. San Francisco with a similar rule for any gathering over 1,000 people. The Golden State Warriors will play the Brooklyn Nets in an empty stadium tomorrow night.
If that means not having any people in the audience when the NBA plays, so be it. But as a public health official, anything that has large crowds is something that would give a risk to spread.
And late today, the NCAA announcing that the public will not be able to attend this year's March Madness basketball tournament. And discussions currently underway about whether the city's beloved St. Patrick's Day parade, which draws roughly 2 million people each year, will be called off.
And Whit Johnson back with us again tonight from New Rochelle. And with Dr. Anthony Fauci was very clear about something else today as well. He was asked if the U.S. is facing shortages of medical supplies and devices. And here's what Dr. Fauci said.
I believe that if we have a major outbreak, we are definitely vulnerable to shortages.
With the White House acknowledging that late today, and we're hearing from health officials around the country who say they could be facing a shortage not only of supplies, but of manpower in this fight.
And David, a senior official with HHS, tells us that a lot of these medical supplies come from overseas, and they're mostly worried about shortages when it comes to healthcare workers and making sure that they have the proper masks and protective gear as they treat infected patients. But they are now working with a variety of companies to try to boost supply.